All right, today we're going to continue reading from where we left off. If you didn't yet complete Monday's assignment, make sure you first complete Monday's assignment before you do Tuesdays. If you did do Monday's assignment, you know exactly what happened between Stacy and TJ and why everyone's at the wallet store when we know they shouldn't be at the wallet store. All right, so let's continue this from where we left off. There you go! Someone shouted as the back door of the storeroom slammed shut. Stacy turned quickly and sped to the back of the building. TJ was fleeing straight towards Soldier's Road. Stacy tore across the Wallace yard and, leaping high like a forest fox, fell upon TJ, knocking him down. The two boys rolled toward the road, each trying to keep each other's back pinned to the ground. But then Stacy, who was stronger, gained the advantage, and TJ, finding that he could not budge him, cried, "Hey, wait a minute, man! Let me explain." Stacy did not let him finish. Jumping up, he pulled TJ up too and hit him squarely in the face. TJ staggered back, holding his eyes as if he were badly hurt, and Stacy momentarily let down his guard. At that moment, TJ rammed into Stacy, forcing the fight to the ground again. Little Man, Christopher John, and I, with the others, circled the fighters, chanting loudly as they rolled back and forth, punching at each other. All of us were so engrossed in the battle that no one saw a mule wagon halt on the road and a giant man step out. It wasn't until I realized that the shouting had stopped behind us and that the girls and boys beside me were falling back that I looked up. Mr. Morrison towered above us. He did not look at me or Christopher John or Little Man, although I knew he had seen us. But he walked straight to the fighters and lifted a still swinging Stacy off TJ. After a long, tense moment, he said to Stacy, "You and your sister and brothers get on in the wagon." We walked toward the now silent crowd. Caleb and Doomberry Wallace, standing on the front porch of the store with the Simpsons, stared at Mr. Morrison as we passed, but Mr. Morrison looked through them as if they were not there. Stacy sat in front of the wagon with Mr. Morrison. The rest of us climbed into the back. "Now we gonna get it," shuddered Christopher John. "I told y'all we should have gone on home." Before Mr. Morrison took the reins, he handed Stacy a handkerchief in which to wrap around his bruised right hand, but he did not say a word until we had passed the crossroads leading to Red Faith, that the silence was broken. "Mr. Morrison, you gonna tell Mama?" Stacy asked huskily. Mr. Morrison was very quiet as Jack the mule clopped noisily along the dry road. "Seems I heard your mama tell y'all not to go up to that Wallace store," he said at last. Yes, sir," said Stacy, glancing nervously at Mr. Morrison. Then he blurted out, "But I had a good reason. I ain't never a good reason good enough to go disobey your mama." The boys and I looked woefully at each other, and my bottom stung from the awful thought of Mama's leather strap against it. "But Mr. Morrison," I cried anxiously, "TJ was hiding there because he thought Stacy would never come down there to get him. But Stacy had to go down there because TJ was cheating. And hush, Cassie," Stacy ordered, turning sharply around. I faltered for only a moment before I decided that my bottom was more important than Stacy's code of honor, and Stacy had to take the blame for it. And Mama whipped him right in front of God and everybody. Once the truth had been disclosed, I waited with dry throat and nauseous stomach for Mr. Morrison to say something. When he did, all of us strained tensely forward. "I ain't gonna tell her," he said quietly. Christopher John sighed with relief. "I ain't going down there no more either," he promised. Little Man and I agreed, but Stacy stared long and hard at Mr. Morrison. "How come, Mr. Morrison?" he asked. "How come you ain't gonna tell Mama?" Mr. Morrison slowed Jack as we turned into the road leading home. "'Cause I'm leaving it up to you to tell her." "What?" we exclaimed together. "Sometimes a person's gotta fight," he said slowly, "but that store ain't the place to be doing it. From what I hear, folks like them Wallaces got no respect at all for colored folks, and they just think it's funny when we fight each other. Your mama know them Wallaces ain't good folks. That's why she don't want y'all down there. And y'all owe it to her and yourselves to tell her. But I'm gonna leave it up to y'all to decide. Stacy nodded thoughtfully and wound his handkerchief tighter around his wounded hand. His face was not scarred, so if he could just figure out a way to explain the bruises on his hand to Mama without lying, he was in the clear, for Mr. Morrison had not said that he had to tell her. But for some reason I could not understand, he said, "All right, Mr. Morrison, I'll tell her." "Boy, you crazy!" I cried as Christopher John and Little Man speedily came to the same conclusion. If he did not care about his own skin, he could at least consider ours. But he seemed not to hear us as his eyes met Mr. Morrison's, and the two of them smiled in subtle understanding, the distance between them fading. As we neared the house, Mr. Granger's Packer rolled from the dusty driveway. Mr. Morrison directed Jack to the side of the road until the big car had passed, then swung the wagon back into the road center and up the drive. Big Ma was standing by the yard gate that led into the drive, gazing across the road at the forest. "Big Ma, what was Mr. Granger doing here?" Stacy asked, jumping from the wagon and going to her. Little man, Christopher John, and I hopped down and followed him. "Nothing," Big Ma replied absently, her eyes still on the forest. "Just worrying me about this land again." "Oh," said Stacy, his tone indicating that he considered the visit of no importance. Mr. Granger had always wanted the land. All right, that's all for today. Go ahead, start answering those questions, and we'll be back tomorrow.